Hey everybody, how you feeling, man? It's Uncle P here, cnpradio.net. I'm in the studio. Where we at? I'm in the studio trying to get the logo up. Um, but I have a great show for you today, a great panel of knowledgeable, right? Forward thinkers, um, anchored by my guy, Ulysses Slaughter. When America catches a cold, black people catch the flu. Why are black communities like Chester always hit hardest when a crisis impacts America? Why are black people reluctant to believe the experts who say they care about black people? How are black people used over and over and over again against black people in the interest of big corporations? Author Ulysses Bush Slaughter and a panel of expert thought leaders talk to the community of CNP Radio about how the black community has been historically, systematically betrayed by those who come in the name of medicine and science. Man, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ulysses Bush Slaughter to the program. How you feeling, good brother?
Good, man. Always good here to be here with you. Always good to be here with you, man.
There
Thank
it
you
is.
so
There it
much.
is. There it is. I want to say happy birthday to you, right?
Thank you so much,
55th
man.
birthday, man. So everybody put a happy birthday in the comments for Butch, Mr. Ulysses Bush Slaughter. And man, listen, it's always a pleasure to have you. Think of me, give me a phone call and say, listen, man, I'm trying to come up here and talk about, COVID and being black while COVIDing, I guess. Is that,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a
that might,
word. Social distancing is a verb all of a sudden. I don't know how
right,
social distancing became a verb, but
right,
I
right.
guess we can
Social
say
distance.
COVIDing too.
Right, right. There it is. I just made that word up. Thank you, Webster's dictionary. I like my money, please.
Get that up.
Thank you. Let's get that going on. But let's welcome in your panel, man, and let's jump into this discussion about COVID. Like I said, I'm just here as that person that wants the knowledge. I need the knowledge. So call me a thought jacker today. I will definitely be jacking your thoughts.
Well, I want to say before we bring them in, I want to say two things. First, man, thank you as always. I got to tell people that when we started that whole campaign to get the MOVE apology going in the city of Philadelphia, you were quick to be supportive of that. And that apology, that historic apology, passed November 12th, 2020, after 35 years. And it was with support of people like you that happened. And I mean that sincerely, man. I mean, when I came to you and was talking about Chester's connection to the MOVE family and the MOVE tragedy, you were quick to say, I'm in. What can I do to help? And it was that kind of support that made that MOVE apology happen. So I want to say thank you, and your audience should know that you played a major role in helping us to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me to come to me and ask me to be a part of it. There's very little that you do that I won't want to be a part of, and I think you know what I'm talking about. So
I,
right, right.
I look, man.
But I'm
It's
definitely
one
with
of
you.
them things, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But when my brother comes to me and he asks me, to be a part of anything that you have going on, I know it's not without careful thought and consideration that you came to me, right? And
Right.
not without careful thought and consideration that you're going up against and ready to battle whoever you're trying to battle. So, you always got me in your corner, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And I got some people that are gonna help with this conversation. And this conversation for me, man, is bigger than COVID, which is why we call this conversation Pondering Perpetual Pandemic Racism. And I want to repeat that. We are pondering, thinking about, deliberating methodically, perpetual pandemic racism. And we say we're pondering, we're thinking about, but we say that it's perpetual. JP, it's always interesting to me how people forget about everything that happened or led up to a moment. They just get kind of caught in the moment. And it's like, wait a minute, don't y'all remember this other stuff?
Can't go in the past. Can't go in the
I
past.
know, I know. And because the past, let many people tell it, has nothing to do with now. And of course, you and I are being sarcastic because nothing can be further from the truth. Our very present is built on the past.
Past. Absolutely.
And that people sometimes don't understand the past comprehensively brings them to a place where when we begin to have a conversation like the one we're going to have right now, they don't know what we're talking about because they have not they have not done the kind of work to understand where they are. They just kind of go with what's going on. And the people I have with me today, they know better. They know better than to just kind of go along with what's being talked about. And I don't want to hold them off much longer, but we're talking about pondering perpetual pandemic racism. That means this has been going on historically, systematically, forever. And whatever crisis we're dealing with right now is built on other unresolved crises. We got to get that clear. Unresolved stuff brings us to where we are right now. All right. So let me go ahead and start bringing him. I got to start with my brother, Eric Shamari Grimes. Let's get my man in because me and his brother go back 25 years. And like you, man, when it gets hot for me, when it gets serious, when I'm ready to go to battle, first phone call, this dude right here. It's been that way for 25 years. Brother Eric Shamari Grimes, many of you all will know that he is a host on WURD, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania's one of the only Black-owned radio stations in the country, which is the other thing I love about working with you, brother JP. We talking Black-owned media. We need to have outlets like yours to do what we do. And he does that for WURD. Brother Shamari, when I said pondering perpetual pandemic racism, when I said that to you early on, what were your thoughts, man?
Well, my first thought is a shame that we got to ponder it. We should know it and be able to take it for granted, and everything we do should operate from that foundation. Because public. To this day, man, one of my favorite songs and Public Enemy songs is "Welcome to the Terror Dome." And so that refrain, move as a team, never move alone. Welcome to the Terror Dome. So everything we do, I operate from that premise, and it's like the fact that we still got to convince our people. I'm not worried about other people. The fact that we got to convince our people that pandemic perpetual racism is a thing, that's a sad state of affairs in 2020, but it's the work we've been left to do. So here we go. Let's ponder.
So I got a few more people I'm going to bring in. At some point, another familiar face is going to join us. That would be the face of one Stefan Roots. Folks around Chester and Delaware County know my man Stefan Roots. He is the Chester City blogger. He will be joining us. Oh, wait a minute. It's like magic. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on? Can you guys hear me all right?
Hear you very well, man. I was just talking about you. Little did I know you was listening to me. I'm glad I was saying nice things about you.
Oh, were you? Okay. Thanks.
When you thought about this thing, bro, what were you thinking, Stefan, when you thought about pondering perpetual pandemic racism?
Well, I have to be really honest. You helped hone my thinking about it. I was really focused on COVID and how it affects Black people just from the perspective of COVID. But you peeled back the onion quite a bit. You said we're being, it's evidence that Black people are being affected very much by this. And it's because of our pre-existing conditions. That's well known. And I documented it very well with all the material I could find that I put on blackcovid19.com. However, you said these pre-existing conditions have been around for a very long time. I said, well, yeah. And you said, well, we've kind of jumped over those pre-existing conditions. Millions of dollars, billions probably, have been spent on this COVID issue, not even addressing the pre-existing conditions. So as we've had multiple conversations with the group we're going to bring on today, I've really learned a lot. It's helped me, like I said, hone my thinking. And like JP with our media outlet, he does internet radio for Chester. I do community blogging for Chester. And we're all just going to get this message out, as explained by our group. And I'm excited to be a part of the group.
I want to bring the other three in just a moment, JP, but I just gotta, with Shamari and Stefan, I really want to nail this because anybody who's watching and listening, I want you to understand we're talking about the question of how did we skip past all the other stuff that we've been going through? Where did the political will come from? Where did all the resources come from? I think about, say, 291 in Chester, right, as one example. People been living like that for I don't know how long, Stefan, and all of a sudden, somebody comes along, the whole world wants to turn and say, we're going to deal with this thing right here. But there were things that were going on before this thing that if we had dealt with those things, we wouldn't be in this moment in this way. So help me understand how that happens. And this is why Shamari said we're pondering. Shamari, you got something you want to add, Deborah?
No, I mean, I'm following your flow. I'm affirming, flowing.
All right. So let's go ahead.
Until you tell me it's my turn.
All right. Let's bring in Dr. Pauline Thompson from Brandywine, Shari, and let's bring Alyssa Miles in, who is a professor at Widener. This is the squad that we have been working with, JP, to get this message out. And early on, we were essentially saying COVID is just a new name with the same affiliated shame. I want to repeat that. We were saying this is a new name for the same old shame. You can look at, and Irva, let's get Irva in. I forgot Irva was with us as well. You can look at the levees breaking in New Orleans. You can look at Cooked, what happened in Chicago when all those people, I think it was 95, Pauline, help me if I think that's right, in 95, where you had people dying of heat exhaustion. You can look at so many examples of how Black folks have been compromised. This ain't just about Tuskegee. And one of the things that's really getting me is everybody keeps talking about Tuskegee. And I'm like, you know how many Tuskegees we've had? You have any idea how many Tuskegees we've had? Pauline, I see you shaking your head. When you think about this idea of perpetual pandemic racism, what comes up to mind for you?
Preventable. Preventable. You know, and maybe somebody could argue and they can say, well, we couldn't necessarily prevent COVID, but you could have prevented the impact. You could have done something about that. And like you already said, that those were choices that people just didn't make.
Right.
Didn't do anything about the state of housing, about the pollution that everybody has always known is there, but you didn't do anything about that. And now we have a crisis, a preventable crisis. That crisis was preventable. And now they say, well, we have a solution. We just have to vaccinate everybody. Oh, wait a minute. But we have issues with trust. We have issues with trust in communities. So now we have to fix the trust. Again, preventable. Mm-hmm. If you had built relationships and had done things the right way all along, we wouldn't have to be dealing with building trust.
I got to throw something in here, Pauline, because I don't want to go too far in this vaccine thing, but I'm not afraid of addressing it. I keep saying the vaccine that we need to have dealt with before now. We needed a vaccine for racism. We needed a vaccine for hunger. We needed a vaccine for corrupt politicians. We need a vaccine for greedy business people. That's where our vaccine worked. We needed warp speed vaccines for that. I looked up, JP, the term warped. When I was a little boy, we used to say this all the time. We'd say that somebody was warped, had warped thinking. And people need to understand that the word warped means abnormal, deranged, right? So we're going to come up with warp speed vaccines for these things. And I'm saying again, abnormal speed vaccines, but you mean to tell me you couldn't come up with the same kind of response to the asthma, to the diabetes? You couldn't come up with the same responses for the lead in all these buildings in Chester? What? It's insulting. I asked some people to join us in addition to Pauline. Irva Baden, I heard about Irva by, I think it was Alyssa Miles who's with us. She said, you got to reach out to Irva Baden. And I said, well, why? She said, well, she's into epigenetics. And anybody who doesn't know what epigenetics is, I'll let Irva explain it herself. But it was imperative that we do some looking backward. And Irva, I need to be quiet so you can say what that's all about.
How much time do we have?
We ain't got enough, but we're going to do this a lot.
Okay. So I want to respond to your question about what was my reaction when you first talked to me, and about the perpetual pandemic of racism. And I believe I said to you, and y'all might need to beat me. I'm just saying, sometimes words come out that really shouldn't.
Oh, go ahead. Do your thing.
Usually they start with F. Okay. I said, listen, I am 71 years old. I am sick of this shit. I've been dealing with it all of my life. In one form or another, racism has impacted me, my family, all the folks I know, and I'm really tired of it. And this next, shall we say, incarnation of how racism is playing out in this country has me just stunned, and I could get into a real depression about it, but some things happened, and some ancestors actually got in touch with me, interestingly enough. We'll talk about that later. And I feel that, it's at this point, I got some work to do and some information to bring out. Do you need me to say more? You want to talk about epigenetics now or later?
Let's give people the sense of what epigenetics is all about.
Okay. So epigenetics is the study of how traumas that happened to our ancestors all the way back still have been moved forward into our systems. I call it the body, mind, spirit. That's what we carry around in our physical bodies, but the whole totality of us has been, shall we say, infected. Not only us, the generation before, it gets passed through the generations. So a trauma happens to someone, let's say back, perhaps on a ship packed with other people that have been stolen and captured. That's a trauma, first of all. There's a reaction that goes on. The brain says, part of the brain says, oh my God, this is really bad. And I'm probably going to die. What can I do? And the biggest, I think, one of the most important features about epigenetics and trauma is that the trauma effect manifests in 4 different ways: fight, flight, freeze. People call the last one fawn. I call it submit. Those are the choices that the reptilian brain, if you will, the primal brain says, this is the only way I can fix this. Either I gotta fight whatever it is, I gotta run from it. If I freeze, maybe it won't see me, whatever this threatening thing is, or I can submit to it. I'm not gonna go into 400 years plus of racism, at least in this country, but when you think of the number of ancestors that each individual has, we are carrying some of the epigenetic residue of the traumas that they experienced. And it influences us in various ways. It can be medical, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual, and intellectual, but we can go into that a bit more later on. But it's enormous. I also find it interesting, if you will, that the first real studies on epigenetics were done with the Jewish Holocaust survivors, and how it is that their progeny, their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, showed evidence of all of the crap that went on. It's called the Dutch famine study. It's also interesting to me that there's not been a study done on the Black Holocaust for 400 plus years. Nobody thought to study that. Lots of trauma happened. Duh. And so, yes, I'm an angry Black woman, and I'm an angry old Black woman. That's really bad. That's me.
Thank you so much, Irva. Shamar, I need to bounce back to you before I go to Alisa and Shari here. One of the things that you and I have talked a lot about in this is the way that people have been using messages and money during this period of time to get Black people to think one way and not using the same money resource with a different message. So it's almost, the censorship thing is huge. So when I come to my man JP and say, look, I need to talk with you, this is one of the rare places where I'm gonna have an opportunity to do that, because so much energy is going into getting us to think one way about this. Talk to us some about that.
Yeah, I don't know how much space I have right now, because I have a model that I want to offer people to kind of pay attention to. And if it's now's the time, let me know, because I know Pauline has to go soon, so you might want to defer to her. But if so, let me know. I'll go. But I offer people to frame. It's like we're dealing with two things: pre-existing conditions, but we got to understand the pre-existing cons. And we're in the midst of a new normal con. And if we don't understand how we've been conned into Tuskegee, how we were conned into colonization, conned into accepting narratives that by default means we're going to be suckers and victims. And so we got to deal with pre-existing conditions and pre-existing cons. And that's what I want to speak into, how you can spot the con of a thing before you get taken.
So when you talk about con, everybody knows what a con artist is. You mean that kind of con, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called the confidence game.
Right. So I want to throw this out, bro, because one of the first things that bothered me before I called on all of you all was I kept looking for the con in this situation, going all the way back to March. I kept saying it's going to be some conning going on around here. And that con became very evident when I came across a Philadelphia Inquirer article back on September 11th that talked about how a 26-year-old young man in Chester County had gotten $13.2 million to develop antibody test. Now, for those that don't know, Chester does not have a health department. Delaware County does not have a health department. Chester County does have one. So when the COVID thing happened, Delaware County contracted with Chester County to provide COVID stuff, COVID operations. I'm going to make this real quick. So Chester County talked to a young man, a 26-year-old St. Joseph's graduate, runs a company called Advite. And he came up with a con package, an antibody package, and sold Chester County a number of more than 100,000, I believe, 100,000 antibody tests. And as it turns out, they tested people and said, with these antibody tests, they told more than 6,000 people that they had COVID. I can share this article, JP. You and I talked some about this. This young man was given $13.2 million in a very short period of time. And he came up with antibody tests, and 6,000 of them were proven to be wrong. But that was only after they sent letters to people saying, you may have COVID, you may be contagious, you should isolate yourself. Can you imagine 6,000 people in Chester getting a letter that says you may have COVID? So going back to your point, Shamari, about the con.
Real quick, you can't skip over an important part of the con, because the money is important, his age is important, but the fact that he's black is also important.
Yes.
Because that's part of the con. You have to have people who are comfortable and connected to you to pull you into the game.
Yes.
And we can't sleep over that, because you see that now with the vaccine con. Well, and I'm not saying the vaccine doesn't work. I'm saying the process is a con. Let's be very clear about that.
Yes.
So don't leave out the fact that he was a young black man.
Well, I also want to mention the fact that when he sold this quantity to Chester County to the tune of $13.2 million, Chester County, on behalf of Delaware County, was actually talking about giving this testing everybody in Chester and Delaware County. That's 1 million people. I have the invoice, JP. I have the invoice. Somebody I know gave me the invoice. It shows that they were prepared to give him $20 per test for 1 million tests. This happened at warped speed. I want to say that again. At warped speed, they gave him $13.2 million for tests that didn't work. And then when they were called on it, there's a line that says in this article that they didn't want to say anything about these faulty tests because then the public may not trust them. And I want to add that on his invoice, JP, it said unrefundable, unreturnable.
Wow.
They couldn't get the taxpayers' dollars back. $13.2 million of con.
Warped con.
Of con.
Warp
speed.
I like that.
Warped con.
It's warped.
Right.
It is really warped. I need to bring in Alyssa Miles and Shari from media. This has been a gathering of people who understand that this challenge that we're having in the Black community requires support from as many places as possible. It is a Black conversation that is going to impact everybody. Alyssa Miles, Shari Stuber, thank you for being part of this conversation. It takes an interesting kind of courage and commitment to be in here. When I said to the two of you, when we first sat down and talked, I said, perpetual pandemic racism. What came to mind for the two of you? Either one of you go, please.
Well, it's really an honor to be in on this conversation. And as Stefan said, I've learned a lot from it. I just wanted to throw in a couple of points about from the transition movement perspective that we're a part of. I think it's really interesting that our country is very quick at throwing money at crises and disasters rather than stepping back to look for and address the conditions that created the disaster in the first place. And of course, my cat has to join into the act here. Hold on. Sorry. So there's always money to respond to hurricanes and wildfires and pandemics and terror attacks, but mitigating air and water pollution, lack of access to healthy food, inadequate housing stock, there never seems to be any money to get to the bottom of those issues. And the environmental conditions in Chester are testimony to this. We turn a blind eye to these problems, and instead of investing in solutions that would provide a safer and healthier life, and improve Chester's ability to survive these kinds of threats like COVID. So we really need a course correction from this permanent, perpetual crisis mode, and really rebuild our communities from the ground up. So there's no better time than now to start doing that. And I hope Delaware County can help out.
I like when you use that term, Shari, course correction, that when people will say, let's get through this, let's, because this is what people are going to say. Well, we just have to get through this. And we're saying, no. We mean right now.
Yeah.
We mean right this minute, course correction right now. You gave somebody $13.2 million. You know where that money could have gone in Chester, JP? What could you do with $13.2 million? It's pretty sad. Alyssa.
Very sad.
When you came into this conversation, what was the thinking for you?
I'm thinking about there is so much attention that goes to the issues that are brought up by the people who run big corporations, and we never hear about Covanta in the mainstream. Hear about toxic pollution, people not being able to breathe. We don't hear about and count the numbers of Black people who suffer and who are dying year by year, who have to live with not only toxins, but also the toxicity of racism that's gone on for generations after generation. And attention gets pulled into the places where people who get to write the history and tell the stories choose for people's attention to go. And I'm so I really appreciate being invited here today. I'm really glad to see and be part of this broadcast and Black-owned media. I feel like we need so much more of that. I'm a psychologist. I'm a therapist. I teach at Widener. And the things that I hear the quote-unquote experts say, they do not match up with the things that I see in the lived lives of Black people and the people I know. Those things don't match up for me. And what ends up happening is there's a lot of shaming that goes on because Black people are told there's something sick in you. There's something bad in you. And shame is what teaches people to hide their faces, look down, not look directly in the faces, in the eyes of the people who are already benefiting and profiting off of the systems of racism and power. Um, and to resist the shaming is a really crucial part of this course correction. Instead of turning the spotlight on what's bad or contagious, quote unquote, in Black people, we need to shift the spotlight onto the people who are allocating the money, choosing where the funding goes, telling people what to pay attention to, which lives count and which ones don't. We need a fundamental shift in what it is that people are paying attention to. When I was teaching and I talked about the MOVE bombings, there's so many people that never even heard of that. Live right in Philadelphia, right in Chester, right in media, never heard of the MOVE bombings. And that's just one example. But the place where our attention, our focus, our money, our resources, our efforts go needs to fundamentally shift and address this long-standing perpetual racism, the betrayal, and the corruption. Thank you for having
Stefan,
me.
from your standpoint, man, this bothers me, and I keep saying to people, let's say everybody were to get vaccinated in the city of Chester, which is where you are, where you live, where you do your work. Does that change the unemployment? Does that change how they live? Does that get them food? Does that what does that not do? Talk to us about how that is, like you said earlier, that's 2 steps removed from the root of the problem, if not 4.
Wow. Well, you know the answer. The vaccine isn't going to change anything other than something in the future, which none of us are clear on. That vaccine was tested after a week or 2, and then it was rushed to approval, simply meaning that they put the vaccine in people, vaccine number 1, vaccine number 2. 2 weeks later, they said, okay, well, 94% of the people who took this vaccine 2 weeks ago did not get COVID. Therefore, this thing works. Maybe it did for 2 weeks, but what's going to happen 2 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now? We don't know. So anyone who gets it early are just the guinea pigs. We're just the test subjects. What's going to happen with people in Chester who's going to get it? Well, will people in Chester get it? We're always the last to get everything, anything, unless you're a frontline worker, unless you're working out at Fair Acres, unless you're at Crozier Hospital, those essential workers who are dealing, on the front lines. They're potentially going to get it first.
And to that point, Stefan Shamari, we talked about money. You and I have been keeping an eye on different people trying to convince Black people. I've seen the Urban League have sessions. I saw the NAACP have sessions. People are trotting out the Black woman who supposedly has something to do with the vaccine development. It's this whole kind of parade of celebrities and doctors and politicians, this whole parade of people trying to convince us of something. And I look at, like, the Howard University president was with Dr. Fauci a while back doing a Black community forum. But nobody said anything about the fact that they had just received $15 million to have this conversation. Right. Nobody said anything that Howard and 10 other HBCUs, and I hate to say it, yours was one of them, Morehouse was one of them, that alma mater, Morehouse of yours was one of them that took $15 million.
That's why I know Negro cons when I see them. That's why I know. I know. I've been on the other side of the sausage making process, bro.
So with that in mind, man, I mean, people will listen to us and they will say, but we got to get safe, but we got to get safe, but we got to get safe. And I'm thinking, there is no guarantee. The only guarantee is the one that we saw out here in Chester County, is that somebody going to get paid.
It's amazing to me, as much as people talk about Tuskegee, and again, you can't really talk about Tuskegee. Well, people talk about Tuskegee, but they don't talk about the role of Robert Moton or the nurse, Eunice Evers or Rivers, whatever, it depends on what version of you read. again, you always got to have a black Pied Piper in the mix. And if people don't get that role above and beyond Tuskegee, go back and study the Negro Project as it related to Planned Parenthood. Because if you understand that and understand the role of the ministers and all of these kind of moral sanctioning authorities who are black, and their job is to seduce us into participation, right? And they get rewarded for that. So just go back and study the Negro Project and Margaret Sanger, because if you can study that, then it leads you to the thinking of Bill Gates, and it leads you to understand why these preachers and politicians and scientists are at the forefront. But if I can real quick, I just want to run through this, so people can actually do your own homework. So I'm gonna just throw you a paradigm that's based on words that we should be aware of. Number one, the first thing I would ask everybody to do, Google and go to YouTube and just take 20 minutes out of your life and look at Dave Chappelle's recent Unforgiven presentation where he talks about getting conned. Go start there, because if you understand that presentation, then you can apply what he taught there to what's going on in front of us now. So step one, go watch Unforgiven. And watch it from the idea of a con and how it works, pre-existing confidence games. And there's three things I want you to just think about. Because I got cons when I was in 11th grade out of $47, and I've never forgotten it. It's framed everything from my life since then. So I'm looking out for multi-level marketing schemes. I'm looking out for the pigeon drop. I'm looking out for every hustle, because when you get $47 taken from you when you're in 11th grade to 17 years old, thank goodness for me, it's left an indelible impression on me. So there's three things I asked myself in that moment. What was I seduced by? Like, what was the message or the moment that drew me in, that made me a sucker? Often it's greed, but sometimes there are other things that seduce you into the con game. Then the second question I asked myself is, what didn't I see? What wasn't I aware of that they knew that was going on? And that's the part. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that they were working together. I thought that was just a random dude who happened to walk up and tell me that he could go around the corner and take out money and get more. Like, I didn't know that 3-card Monty. You don't know that the people who are winning, that's why this Dave Chappelle piece is important, are actually part of the con, and their job is to make you put your money down because you just saw them win. That's what $13 million will make you do. It'll make you say, okay, they saying that they understand Tuskegee, so it'll make you let your guard down. And then the third thing is, and how do I make sure I teach other people so that they don't get conned like I got conned? And maybe that's our inoculation and our vaccine, is to teach other people to see the con so that they don't get conned. And that's what we're trying to do right now. So when you watch Unforgiven, ask yourself those three questions, and then I want to give you this framework. Because you should have, my antenna went off when I heard the word new normal a long time ago. New normal lets you know that a paradigm shift is being planned. Because you got to ask yourself, new normal, what is the agenda to get there? And then I said, okay, new normal. And so understand, what's the conversation that people had to have before they said, we want to create this new normal called slavery? Right? There has to be a conversation. So how does the new normal that they're projecting impact me now? And let's do some reverse engineering. So I'm going to just throw these out and then I'm going to be quiet. You got to understand what your now is. You got to understand what has to get negated in order to bring forward the new normal. You have to now understand, now they're in a process now of negotiation. They're negotiating with us to accept the new normal. They're nudging. Nudging is a form of choice architecture. It's a psychological principle, and they're signaling us by way of nudging or prodding us into accepting the new normal. So you got to see the nudges. Then you got to say, okay, what are the norms of the new normal? How are they going to normalize those norms? Because that's a process called socialization. And how are they going to then make the norms normative, i.e. the way we now define ourselves? And that's why we're seen as radicals, and everybody lining up for the vaccine is seen as normal, because they shift the normative. And then voila, once you get people to participate from those norms, you normalize them through education, socialization, marketing, propaganda, public relations, which we're in the midst of right now. Then they begin to normatively act. that becomes your new normal. And people who, like us, are trying to make sense of the now become the outcasts, because the normalization process has turned us into the villains or the traitors or the non-participants, those rabble rousers and rascals. And so people need to understand that we're in the midst of this process right now, which is when and only when you can actually do something about it. Now is our time to upend the new normal. And by the way, their definition, if you want to understand the norms of their new normal, go and understand what they're calling the Great Reset of 2021, because that's the new normal that's being pushed for. You can't say you didn't know after this point. Homework given.
And with that, Shamari, I'm thinking about the way that people will listen to this and they'll feel overwhelmed and then just fall flat. They will go, "Oh, that's just too much for me. I can't do that. That's just." And I'm thinking, Irva, when you say epigenetics, and you talk about the stuff that's in our respective blood and the traumas and the things that all of us see. I got this picture of my parents up here, and I think most people know that when I was 12 years old, my father shot and killed my mother, right? And I was there when it happened. And that feeling still lives in me. It's something that will never go away. And all of us have stuff like that will never go away. And there, people who are watching this have been traumatized or had something bad happen in their lives. I know it. And so when I think about moving this conversation forward and using my trauma, so to speak, to transform as opposed to being locked down by this, I think, how would my mother and father at their best want me to be? You know, so when I think about this from an epigenetic standpoint, or when you think about it from an epigenetic standpoint, as much as we've been through, what would the people, our ancestors, be saying to us right now, Irva?
First of all, own it. Own it. Don't push it back. Don't try to hide it, but stand and face it. Only by facing the wounding that has happened, the traumatization that has happened in our folks for over 400 years, can we actually do something about releasing it now? And I'm an energy worker, okay? I truly believe in all manner of, quantum physics and all of that stuff, but it energetically, it exists in us, and it causes us to react in certain ways, old traumas. That you just said a key piece about, okay, so here's something bad that happened, and now I feel, like if it's going to happen again, I feel frozen. I don't understand. Freeze. That's a trauma response. The cognitive brain is trying to make sense, but the reptilian brain is going, listen, we have been here before. Okay, here's your options. Either I will fight this, I will just freeze about it, I will submit to it. These are not, these are options that come up so quickly that they're not conscious. They're not really conscious. And what we need to do is understand how we react to things and slow the reaction down so we can get rid of the reaction and move into action, actual action.
I just want to point this out, Shamari, too, because people miss this point. And I think most people know what Planned Parenthood is. Most people have heard the term Planned Parenthood. But what they don't know is that Planned Parenthood,
the normalized version. They're familiar with the normalized version of what it is now. They might not know what it was before it became normal.
It's worth looking at.
That's why they got to go.
It's worth looking at that there are people on this planet, just like there were people on the planet who decided to enact this major slave trade. There are people on this planet that think that they are better than other people. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, thought that there was a group of people that was better.
Right.
And they looked at the Negro problem. We were a problem.
Right.
People have been looking at black folks like we a problem for a long time. So when I see
what's called the Negro Project, because
the Negro Project,
You want to fix the problem. And that's what Planned Parenthood was. And so the thing about this normative process is we got to pay attention to, which is where I am, is the manipulation of words and meanings and symbols. Because again, what they do in the language is what was 50, 60 years ago, a conversation that would be called eugenics. Now I clean it up and it's called, a right to choose, or it's called abortion, but abortion has become normative. And if you're here now, but you don't know the history, you don't understand that the idea of a fetus, where does life begin, which was the core question, they were able to change the definition, right? All throughout human history, life begins. Some African people would say it begins when you begin to think about having a baby. When you begin to think about procreation, that's where life begins, right? Others would at least say, where the biology and the science landed was, well, at least it begins at conception. So that what you're carrying inside you is actually life. And literally a redefinition. And whether you agree with the definition or not, I'm not going to argue that value. I'm just laying out the normalizing process. The definition of where life begins was changed. And the creation of this item called the fetus that now people could own and begin to determine who has ownership over this new product called the fetus then changes the conversation. And then you can create a process now called abortion that the owner of the fetus has a right to do, and you have no right to challenge that right. That's a normalization. That's the process we're in right now. The redefinition of terms and processes that we normally would have been normal 20 years ago, or even just yesterday, are now being rewritten. And we just got to determine which side of this you want to be on, because they're going to have implications for you and yours.
And I think that, brother JP, I'm listening to this conversation, and I have to say, man, I haven't heard this kind of a conversation anyplace else. The conversations that are mostly out there are the ones that have a lot of money behind them and are pro-vaccine, pro-get tested. It's all one-sided, and people need to ask themselves, isn't there another side of this conversation? Isn't there another way of looking at this? And so
I think that's the first step of communication, is understanding that you're not the only person with the answers. So to bring people together that have multiple answers is how you come up with a true purpose or a true definition of whatever problem you're dealing with. It can't just be one-sided. All right, we got to do this, we got to do that.
And I think, though, that
one
of the things that we've been pushing, this group, we're supposed to be addressing Delaware County Council on Thursday, and we'll keep you posted on this. We'll see how this is going to work out. People need to listen. There are people that think that they can just jump into conversations. Like there's a conversation everybody wants to have around, how do you get Black people to trust? Well, how about starting not with getting them to trust, but let's talk about how they've been betrayed. And let's spend a lot of time talking about that, because I love this quote where James Baldwin says, this ain't simple stuff. This is complex stuff. But you want us to just go, okay, I trust you now. No, building trust is a reconciliation process, which requires a conversation. It's going to take some time. So I tell you what, like I said, you want to talk vaccines, you want to do a COVID vaccine. Well, when we going to get that racist vaccine warp speeded? When we going to get that greed vaccine warp speeded? When we going to get that political corruption vaccine warp speeded? Let's warp speed those, because we believe that if we can warp speed those, this other stuff that we talking about, the sickness, the pre-existing conditions, and as Shamari said, the pre-existing, how do you put it, Shamari? The con? Those things, you gonna say it?
Yo, pre-existing cons, that's it.
The pre-existing, we can deal with this other stuff. See, we got people who were already sick, who just got sicker. That's what we got. We got people who were already sick and ignored, neglected for decades. No, I gotta repeat, ignored, neglected for decades. And all of a sudden, y'all want to help us?
Centuries.
I'm sorry.
Centuries.
I'm off by centuries. Now y'all want to help us? You mean to tell me you all came up with the political will in March 2020? It just happened in March 2020. the political will, mobilization of resources, integrated strategy. Y'all just figure this out?
Mm-hmm.
Nah. See, black people smart. And this is the thing, I'm going to make this my last point. This is the thing that really bothers me about this, Stefan, is that they talking to us like we stupid. This bothers me. Y'all talking to us like we stupid. Like we just supposed to kind of go along with what you say. And for everybody who knows that I love everybody in the world, I got to say this too. I get tired of looking at smart ass white men on TV telling everybody else what to do. I get tired of it. I get tired of a white dude in a jacket or a white dude in a suit telling everybody else in the world what's going to happen. I'm tired of it.
Well,
and we need to say we tired of it.
That's the old normal that ain't going nowhere in the new normal. And that's the thing people got to get. That's out of everything in the new normal, that's the old normal that they ain't going to change for nobody unless we make that change.
Hey, I want to go back to what Shamari brought up, and that was the Dave Chappelle piece. I'm going to second his emotion. You got to watch it. But there's one piece in there that I think needs to be brought out. And that was when Chappelle, well, first of all, it has nothing to do with comedy. So just be prepared for that when you do see it. He's sitting on the stool, just talking truth, talking about his history, talking specifically about being conned. The part that really struck me and how it relates to this group is where it was the point at which Chappelle discovered the con, and he saw the people were all involved in it. And he hollered out when the next victim came up and said, "It's a con. All these guys are in on it." That's what we're doing here today. We're letting you know all these guys are in on it. But more importantly, they reacted to him. They gripped him up, put him up against the wall, and they said these very words: "Don't stand between a man and his money." We know everybody isn't ready to get gripped up. But when Ulysses came to all of us, he pretty much asked us, are we ready to get gripped up? Because we're going to be speaking truth. We're going to be exposing a con. And we all are out here on the front lines because we don't expect to have 20, 50, 100, 1,000, 33,000 people from our city, if we're just looking at our city, to join us in this conversation. We're on the front lines for you guys. And when we show how this thing will work for our community, it will spread across the country. I'm certain.
Stefan, that somebody, JP, I don't know how much time we got, but I just want to go back to this con thing and throw the money at it. Because if one 26-year-old in Chester County can make $13.2 million in Chester County, how much money is this making for people all around the world?
Billion.
I heard a dude whose name everybody knows, who's a technology giant, one of the richest men in the world. I heard him say about vaccines when he invested in them years ago, that for the vaccine, I can make $20 for every dollar that I invest in vaccines. $20 for every dollar. Okay. And he wasn't talking about he was investing $40. Y'all know that.
Right.
He was investing billions. And he's saying, people are making money off this. This is not people being nice to one another. This ain't about people saying, I care about y'all. I love y'all. I want to do what's right. This is people making money.
So is this why it's come out so fast? Why there's an emergency release of this vaccine? A vaccine that normally would take anywhere from 2 to 5 to 10 years to test to be totally effective? Or does someone need to make money right now?
Stefan, we know about this. We know this stuff. We know this from the street corners, man. We know from this is what I'm saying. The people in Chester and spots like this where our people are, people know how to make money. They know that, you want twice as much back at least. What, right? They know you don't do this for free. Ain't nobody doing this for free. Shamari often says, who benefits? Who benefits? All this time you've been ignoring us, and now you want to help us? What you getting out of this? We know this from the block. What you getting out of this? You coming to help me? I don't know that anybody's got any final statements, JP, and I know that we are short on time, bro. But
Right, I'm gonna go till 5:30. I don't mind.
Hey, speaking
I'm
of
usually
money,
here alone, so I enjoy the company. Don't get me twisted.
let me
Right.
throw this money statement out. Melvin Wade, a guy who is part of the environmental situation here in the city. I wrote a book on him, spent a lot of time with him. He says one thing as a businessman. He says he operated down on the riverfront, and people who are on the riverfront aren't here to make a living. We're here to make money.
Mhm.
So when we think about what's on our riverfront, those guys aren't there to make a living. They're not there to make our living any better. They're down there to make money.
Shari, Alisa, I want to
Yeah, I
make
want
sure
to
that
add. I want to add in that keeping people sick, especially people of color, keeping people sick is really profitable. Health, what they call health care, is one of the biggest money-making industries, growing industries that there is. And if you have an incinerator and a sewage plant that's where all the trash of the county comes to be processed in Chester, it's a lot of profit to be made off of that. To keep people sick makes more money for these biotech and pharmaceutical and other companies than the money that would be made by actually taking care of people, getting rid of the pollution and the toxins. And that's not something that I find that I hear about anywhere else. I'm glad to be here with you all to talk about this.
I really don't have much to add to this. It's really, it's been great listening to all of this, but I think it really comes down to that, this country is sick, and particularly the Black communities are sick and need more than a vaccine for COVID to get better. And that's what we need to focus on.
I appreciate that. Irva, you got a last thought here?
Of course. I think that it behooves us all to think big and think about the eradication of white supremacy. It's a philosophy that's been in place for hundreds of years in various continents and countries. And it seems to me that capitalism has sprung out of that, all of the stuff. How is it that this world, this entire world, which is so diverse, has fallen into the shackles of white supremacy? Irva out.
Irva out. Yes. Yeah.
Brother Shamari.
I want to veggie back or tail on what Mama Irva just offered, because I think that, again, if you think about how did white supremacy become
Yes.
a normal, the
Yes.
new normal? What did it have to negate? What were the values that became like? This is this is what, because we're on the verge of this. There are people who are saying we're reconstructing and resetting the world to bring about a new normal. And we have been on the butt end of other people's new normals for a very long time.
Mm.
And it's time for us to exercise our power, our agency, our authority. I do a lot of work around narrative. I'm talking about the power of autobiography, that we have to return to ourselves and stop letting other people write upon us and write for us or tell others what we meant to say. Mm-hmm. Let's exercise the power of autobiography and let that become our new normal.
Stefan.
You asked us to put together maybe a 2 to 3 minute elevator pitch. And for anyone listening to this, you can tell that all of us come from a different perspective. We're all talking about perpetual pandemic of racism, but we all have our own opinions and views, and we're learning from each other, and it's great. But I just want to read one paragraph from my little elevator pitch. And pardon me for reading, but I just can't memorize my own stuff. Joan Rivers is famous for saying, "Can we talk?" When a community is given the tools to talk and the data to talk intelligently, they contribute to finding their own solutions. As long as solutions continue to rain in from outsiders, strangers, and the so-called experts with no connection to the community, there will be doubt and resistance, even if it's not in our best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, my brother. And I want to thank everybody. JP, for you to open up the lines to us, man, the air to us, to let us have this conversation. Anybody who wants to reach us can reach to JP, and JP will get you to us. I don't want to go through the whole email, website, that thing right now. You want to reach out to us, you can go to JP, and he knows how to reach us. This is a conversation that needs to be had, because we are, as Shamari said, we are now on that edge, that point of possibly no return. Shamari, people talk, in circles that we run in about that door of no return in Africa that's set on the west coast of Africa. When you open up that door, and everybody knew that door meant that you wasn't coming back home. And this is one of those spaces where we need to be thinking about when that door opens, or as even Gil Scott-Heron said, he said, down some dead end streets, there ain't no coming back. If you don't stop and talk to people and say, let's just put a pause on this. And again, ask some questions about just how y'all come up with all this money and all this planning and all this. Y'all did this in 9 months when y'all ain't been able to do this, as Irva said, in several hundred centuries. You ain't been able to figure this out, but now all of a sudden you figured it out. The fact of the matter is that the plan has been, and it's a business plan. Let's get clear about that. The business plan has been in development for a long time. And now here's the opportunity to, as they say, roll it out. And let's get all of the players to help us roll it out. Let's find some black people to put on, suits and smile and say all the things that we're all in this together. Ain't nothing further from the truth. We are not and never have been in this together. That ain't what it is. Shamari?
I just want to build on Mama Irva again. I agree with you, but I also offer that as long as you're alive and as long as we're breathing, return is always an option. There's never a door of no return. We just have to determine whether we want to fight to return. And that's one of the options in the freeze, fight, flee. Fighting is an option. Fixing the dilemma in front of you is an option. And I think that in the spirit of Sankofa, the Akan spirit of Sankofa, let's choose to return, and let's choose to have the courage to engage the fight that we're going to have to go through to return.
All right.
Wow.
Oh, there it is.
I didn't know that. See, that's what I'm talking. That's the ancestor talking right there.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Ashe.
JP, thank you, my brother.
Oh, thank y'all. Absolutely. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Not a lot of time where cnpradio.net has so many bright minds and so many people that come together to give the knowledge to the people that are watching. So I thank y'all. And listen, I'm going to let y'all know right now, whenever y'all want to come back, man, please come back. Please come back and give us the knowledge, please.
Well, we are going to be talking with Delaware County Council at some point this Thursday, somewhere this Thursday. We'll let you know. And we hope that you'll let your audience know that there's a conversation that needs to be had with political leaders who are supposed to represent where they live and serve, and not outside of this place. You are elected to serve this location, not the interest of global people, not the interest of national people. We need to talk to you about your responsibility right here in Delaware County. That's what we want to do. And we'll let you know when we're doing that this Thursday. It'll happen at 4:00. We'll let you know where we're doing it. And I'm hoping that the people who are tuned in right now will join us. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, man, this is extremely important. Right. So this is what I did today, real quick, right? Just bringing up the different, the Center for Disease Control and how this disease affects us as Black people. Discrimination, healthcare access and utilization, occupation, education, educational income and wealth gaps, and housing. All the things that he already talked about, all the things they mentioned, all of this. It's there. It's up to you to go out and get the knowledge, man. It's up to you to say, I'm not taking no more of the BS that they kicking in my ear. It's up to you to fight and stand up for the things that are valuable to you. Listen, I love my grandma, and I love my grandma, listen, beyond life. When my grandma told me, listen, your life is yours, nobody else's. What you do and what you choose to accept in your life is going to affect you for the rest of your life. Don't be no fool. Your grandma ain't raised no fool. I love y'all, man. It's cmpradio.net. I'm telling y'all right now, right? Accept the knowledge that's being given. The people that are stepping up in front of you and willing to lead you, right? They're a leader, they're followers. I get it. I understand it, right? But what makes a good leader is his ability to follow. Follow at all times, man. I'm out of here. Peace. Love you.